So now that's done, it's time to relamp the beast. It's got a number of large tungsten lamps behind the front panel, because the front panel is a bit like an iPhone screen. It's glass, very, very delicate. So I had to figure out how to strip all that down to get to the lamps. And also there are a number of lamps associated with the push button selectors on the front. And what I didn't realize was there are two tiny little tungsten lamps that are in the rotary selection knobs for the input selections and the stereo mode, and they didn't come as part of the kit, and one of them have failed. So I went to the electronics shop in Tucson and I was fortunate enough to find something that would fit, so you can see that going into. Enjoy it. Okay, here we are back again with the C28 saga. I'm going to the electronics shop in Tucson tomorrow, at least I hope I am, to get a replacement capacitor for it, for a temporary fit. I'm going to completely recap it with a kit later, but this is just to keep it, you know, going. But also, as we found out last time, I don't know if I can get this light right, but after having replaced all the LEDs, all the panel lights with LEDs, this little selector switch here that it's got a small incandescent lamp in it, and that failed, so I'm going to replace that with an LED, and this one as well, which is still working. So first up, we've got to get the front panel off again. So luckily I know how to do it now, and it's easy. So it's a matter of pulling these control knobs off like this and making sure you keep the little felt washers, taking all those off, then we'll see what. Okay, that's got all the knobs off. So armed with prior knowledge now, took me an hour to sort this out the first time. We've got to remove these two screws on each side. Now, here are all the bits and pieces, and the screws are out, so I have to do this one-handed because I don't have a tripod. This front panel should come off, should, but I have to be very, very careful, so I better do this with the amp. Should not, because I forgot these two little puppies there, getting in my own light, so they've got to come out too. Okay, here's one I prepared earlier, so it now just lifts out. One front panel. Now this front panel is worth noting because it's made of glass. It's like an iPhone screen, and it's very, very easy to damage it, and it's also, as you can see, very difficult to keep clean. It's very, very easy to damage, and also the secondary benefit of doing this is eventually this and the power amp is going to be shipped back to Thailand with me in a flight case, and the most likely thing to get damaged in transit is this screen. It's almost impossible to find one of these amps that hasn't got some kind of damage on the front screen. You can get new ones, but they're not cheap, and this one is pretty well perfect. So what I'm going to do is prior to shipping, I'm going to take that screen off of the amp and wrap it up in bubble wrap and put it in my cabin baggage, and just take it cabin baggage so it doesn't get bashed around. The amp itself will be fine, I'm sure. So, just wait for the next little bit. So, if I turn this on now, that looks nice, doesn't it? You can see that here are the 4 main panel lamps that have been replaced with LEDs, and these are the main selector switches, which have also been replaced with LEDs. But the fly in this ointment is, you see these 2 selector switches here, there's a little tungsten lamp in there, and this one has failed. So I've got to replace it, and if I'm doing that, I might as well replace both of them. So I prefer to replace them with LEDs, but I've got to go to the shop and see if I can find an LED that will fit in there. If not, I've got to replace them with tungsten. So I think that these are fed from 6.3 volts AC off of a secondary winding of the main power transformer, and that voltage comes up on these little posts here. So before going to the shop tomorrow, I've got to just check, see what that voltage is. And it turns out it's actually 5.5 volts AC. So now armed with that, I can work out what kind of series resistors I need and all that good stuff for lamp or LED. So here is the failed lamp, and the wires go into it, so I'll just snip those off and remove the lamp, take it with me. There we have it, one lamp. I don't know if it'll focus. So hopefully I'll be able to get an LED to go in there, but I have to be careful, of course, because LEDs are designed to be viewed end on like this, whereas this being a tungsten lamp can quite happily be viewed sideways. So I've got to have a look at that and see. But now I know the voltage, I know the current from the specs of whatever I buy, so probably going to have to put a series resistor in. I might only be able to buy a 12 volt lamp, for instance, you know. So anyway, there we are, that's the latest thing. I'll let you know when I've got stuff. So the first thing to figure out is whether these 2 incandescent lamps I bought, which look identical to the one that came out, they're 6 volt, fit inside this the way the old ones did. So that's the first step. Well, the lamp fits, but there's always a problem, isn't there? The lamp's got a slightly different, heavier gauge of wire on it than the original, so it won't go through these holes. This is like a holding thing, so both wires have got to go through one hole. So you're going to have to ream it out, I'm afraid. So yes, it does fit. Well, that works. Well, it will work okay. Tried it on there. This wire needs to be extended a little bit. Soldered directly onto these tabs here. Okay, so that's both the new lamps installed, and now these wires will need to be extended slightly and routed up to here. So with my very rudimentary setup here, hope you can see, I've now wired in these lights, and you have to make sure that you allow for the fact that these switches here move like this, and you can see they kind of unwind the cables. Now this is normally behind the front panel, so we'll find out in a minute, but I'm hoping that this will just unwind down here and it won't hurt anything, and the same with this switch here. So they're all kind of wired up now and tacked nicely into place and across the 2 terminals there. So now we'll switch her on and find out if they work, and I don't know, so my heart is pounding in my chest. Let's switch her on. Nothing. Okay, front panel's back on. Let's try. Yes. Okay, it's all there, and work around there, leave it in stereo, input selection. Okay, all the other lamps are on. All this shit works. Okay, that's a good, that's a pass. And now the next thing to do is to put in this temporary capacitor. It's a bodge to repair a bodge, if you like. Because later on I'm going to be completely recapping this, but here we are. There's now a completely relamped Mac C28. Doesn't she look lovely?